Hello everybody, this is Alex from Hardcoin Guys, being my guide for Dead Space on Impossible difficulty. Today we're doing Chapter 4, entitled Obliteration Imminent. And this is going to be the notorious chapter that has the turret minigame. The first one, the asteroid minigame, or whatever you want to call it. And quick tip for how to deal with the asteroid situation is you kind of want to use both cannons, because a lot of the time if you're using one of the cannons, they tend to miss more often than not. So keep that in mind while you're, blasting away. Try to alternate between the two and get it going in rapid fire. And just watch your heat bar, of course. It doesn't take too long to overheat, but it also does overheat to be annoying enough to actually bother you. There's also another tip that I've heard online is you can raise up the brightness to kind of see the asteroids in the farther distance, because it's kind of hard to see them from, that far away. So you could always just try to take them out before they come into play. Also try to attack the bigger asteroids on your way there, but I'll probably get back into that when we get there. There's also, of course, the asteroids on the edge of the screen. Don't need to worry about them. But like I said, I might just bring that up later, because somebody might, end up skipping ahead of the video to get to that part, and I want to make sure that they're, informed once we get there. So other than that, this is the second time I've actually done this recording. The first time I recorded like half of this and found out that I wasn't even recording commentary at all in the first place. So that was very fun. And other news that might sound very exciting. I kind of want to get people's... I don't want to get too many expectations up and too many hopes up, but in terms of my guides, there's going to be another guide that will, of course, come after this one. That's the plan. I mean, there might be some other stuff in between. I don't know, probably not. But for the most part, at some point in time, after Dead Space is done, there's going to be another guide that I plan on doing if everything goes well. And I don't want to spoil the name of the guide just yet. You're going to have to wait till like episode 12 of Dead Space to find out what that episode could be, or what that guide's going to be called. And I may or may not work on it in between Dead Space, but they're not going to be uploaded in between though, just to make things more organized. But I will give you some hints. It is a franchise that I actually do kind of like, and it only has, for the most part, technically 4 games, 3 mainline games and a spin-off. We're not talking about games that, have been remastered. We're not talking about like that type of stuff. I'm talking about like it has 3 numbered games in all technicality. It had different versions of them. The original game was on Xbox, and then it came over to PlayStation with a different title. And not only that, but this is the 3rd game of that franchise I'm playing. And another clue is it's a hack and slash. So it's a franchise that I like quite a bit. Again, they have a 4th game, but it's also a spin-off of it, and it's not really much of... it's not a numbered title. But anyway, so this is going to be the introduction of our brutes. And some quick tips I want to give. If you shoot them in the front, you basically want to aim for the yellow parts. If you shoot him in the front, he will actually curl up into a ball, and that's pretty much the advantage we want to take. If you want to do what I'm doing right now, what you can do is just stasis and then run immediately behind him and shoot him in the legs or shoot him in the back of the arms. The reason why shooting him in the front kind of works a little bit better is because a lot of the time they tend to kind of just curl up into a ball if you shoot them from the front seemingly more often. At least that seems to be the case for me. I've noticed a lot of the times that whenever I'm shooting like the next brute, because there's going to be another brute that shows up in this very same chapter. Once I'm fighting like the next one, he'll probably end up, curling into a ball more often. So another thing too is if the charging gets too worrisome, then just, shoot him in the back of the legs to knock off the legs, so that way he doesn't try to, come after you too hard. Also, even if the brute is inside of stasis, he can still ram into you and still kill you with, the charging attack. So be careful of that. Oh yeah, also my game froze right there. That was not like my editing software or anything like that that froze. That's just, for some reason, I'm playing on PS3, and a lot of the time, the game likes to kind of get a little bit buggy with me. Not too much, but just enough to be kind of a little bit scary sometimes. So let's see, what do I upgrade today? I know I get something. I thought I got something. I might have started the upgrading for the stasis, or not. Maybe it's a plasma cutter upgrade. Oh, okay, so I just buy a non-node node, or what do you want to call it? A non-upgrade node, basically, just to kind of get the routing going. Because getting that plasma cutter upgraded as fast as possible is kind of what I'm pretty much trying to aim for. And also something I was talking about, like when I was doing this commentary originally, was this game is very lenient on ammo a lot of the time, at least until you get to the Leviathan fight, and then that becomes a little bit more scarce to have to deal with. They don't seem to supply you just enough ammo to take him down, although they do give you like little ball things that you can throw at him and stuff. They do give you the supplies to take it down without ammo, but still, you know. And something to keep in mind, though, is if you're running, you know, like a secondary gun, if you're running just like 2 guns and you're not worrying about any other guns besides just like the 2 you want, then it makes the game just a tad bit easier, as weird as that might sound, because you're kind of just saving ammo, and you're also able to get ammo from different weapons and be able to sell it for whatever you want, you know, get more credits out of that and just use it for anything else, say like a node or maybe even ammo of its own. Also, of course, you know, we have a straggler in here that just tries to, you know, tried to spook you, but no, it doesn't really work. It's Dead Space, so. Okay, you know what? That's something I probably should talk about too. Is, I mean, I've played these games for years and I've gotten used to, you know, the jump scares. They don't startle me near as much as like maybe they used to, but I don't really honestly find Dead Space that scary, and I don't think I mean, Dead Space 2 maybe is like the closest contender to being scary, but that's not me trying to be like a badass. I'm just being genuinely honest. It's the same thing with Resident Evil 4. Like, I feel like it's too much of an action game to be too scary. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'm more interested in just, you know, trying to find the next enemy to take down than I am being worried about them. They don't scare me. And I think that's just probably the issue there, too, is, like, if the enemies don't scare you and you're not frightened of fighting back, you end up just becoming a martyr and just take them down, and just, you know, they become kind of like an annoyance, and you're like, all right, time to take down the next motherfucker. So, yeah, I guess I kind of ruined Dead Space for myself. Like, even in the remake, like, yes, I played Dead Space 1 a lot, but even in the remake, you know, nothing new really terrified me much. And I don't mind that necessarily. I'm not trying to say like I'm a badass because I don't get scared of Dead Space, but like, it's just I don't feel like Dead Space is that scary. And, you know, maybe when I was younger, maybe, but I just don't really get it. It's the same case with Resident Evil 4. It's like, the only thing that really terrified me the most was probably like the regenerator back then, you know, because like that motherfucker wouldn't die until you knew how to kill him. So, you know, running away from that, you know, that was pretty tense. For the most part, it's like every once in a while you might get startled, but other than that. Also, yeah, so as you can see, what I'm doing here is I just essentially wait for these guys to group up, the lurkers to group up. Also, there's a slasher back here, so don't forget about him. Yeah, just watch your rear back here. So I just wait for the lurkers to group up and then attack them from, you know, either on the wall, or at least try to get them grouped up and just waste them with stasis and melee, because we do have a stasis module, and I will come back to use this very specific module too later on, and I will cut that out. I will show that I come back to get it, but I'm not going to show like the entire elevator right down here. But yeah, anyway, back to, you know, scary games. Like BioShock's also considered scary, but that never really got me. Like, I mean, again, maybe when I was young, you know, a startle or whatever, like, of course. But for the most part, like, they never really came off scary. It just came off like a fun game that I could just, you know, blast through and defeat my enemies. And the enemies became less of, you know, a scare and more of like a, not a chore, but like something I can, you know, beat up and have fun doing so, I guess. It became more of like a game, really. Alright, so next area. This is, you know, of course, the next brute. You kind of want to have a little bit of an open area here to kind of take them out because, you know, there's a lot of walls in the way. But pretty much just do what you did before. And notice how, like I mentioned before, and this is what's great about doing commentary twice, is I actually could, you know, not have to repeat the same mistakes again and be a hypocrite about certain things I say or whatever. So, notice how when I shot him 3 times in the arm, it ended up making the brute curl into a defensive position. And that's kind of what we want to try to go for, is we want to try to make him, you know, stop charging at us from the front. And then, by the front, I mean like attacking him from the front, and then just, you know, getting him to kind of ball up. It doesn't work like 100% of the time, but a few shots to the front tends to kind of make him back off a bit. So that way you can kind of start using your attacks from behind and just sort of, wail on the arms and the limbs and stuff and knock them off. So that's one strategy you could do. You could also, of course, just wail him from the back in general if you wanted. If you got the stasis for it. That's another thing, too, is if you got the stasis for it, the brutes become kind of just mindless. They're not incredibly difficult. They do have a close-to-death insta-kill, like, charging attack. But for the most part, they're not that bad. They're only bad when you have to deal with other enemies. And generally speaking, that doesn't seem to happen, like, ever. So, I mean, a lot of the strong points of them become kind of just nothing. Now, granted, if you had no ammo, then that might be a different story, but I feel like this game gives you enough ammo to take down brutes before you get there, so I would assume you'd be okay. Also, of course, there's the elevator upstairs that leads straight to a shop, so if you needed money or needed ammo for, any reason, if you did, waste ammo, which, that's another thing, too, is even though the game might be a little bit lenient with ammo for the most part, not extremely lenient, but just enough to where it feels like I'm not always running out of ammo, like, RE1 or whatever. Even when it doesn't do that, you still kind of have to be just a little bit worrisome about your ammo consumption. You really want to try to go for, de-limbing and stuff. You don't want to try to go for chest attacks and what have you. Which, that's something that the Dead Space remake kind of, originally... they might have fixed it now, but originally, when the game came out, it was bugged to all hell and back. It still kind of is for the most part, but it was pretty bad. And yeah, a lot of situations ended up being like you just have some weird damage on enemies. But in this game, it seems to be all kind of relatively fine for that matter. You de-limb an enemy, like a couple shots to the legs, like, with these slashers right here, as you saw, like a couple of shots with the plasma cutter, this upgraded, they actually did show damage and did show me, de-limbing the enemy and what have you, and I was able to take him down in like 3 shots, so. But then, like, the Dead Space remake sometimes kind of has this weird damage problem where, I don't think it's still there anymore, but it was there for a little bit, where sometimes you could shoot a necromorph, like a slasher, for instance, like right in the chest, 3 shots to the chest, and it would kill him. And it's like, that's not how that works. If you shoot them in the chest, that's not going to do a ton of damage. That's kind of the idea of the de-limbing system, is you really want to kind of aim for, knocking off limbs, because the game literally tells you to de-limb, and on top of that, it tells you straight up that you do more damage, so you might as well do that. And of course, in this room we have leapers to deal with, and I mentioned this in a previous video before, but something I should have actually started using, or at least noticing much earlier, but I was kind of dumb. I wanted to do a playthrough, I think this was my first attempt playthrough at Impossible Mode again. As in, first attempt recording, or just first attempt on this new playthrough. This new full playthrough on this new account. So, because I have done Impossible Mode back when I was young, and I kind of understand Dead Space enough to know how to be able to go through it again just fine. But, yeah, so something I wish I kind of would have known a little bit earlier was that attacking leaper heads tends to kind of disorientate them, and make them sometimes kind of wobble around and not understand where they're at, because they don't have, the vision to see where you're at. Potentially. That's what it looks like happens. Now, I can't be 100% sure. I'm never 100% sure on certain things, because I feel like, I'm always making up crap on accident. I don't mean to, I don't actually mean to just make up stuff. But yeah, after that fight, I come back down here and grab some, stasis again. That's what I did. That's what that cut was. So I go back down the elevator that went to the brute room, for those that are wondering. But if you know another stasis module, then yeah, take that one. Also, I keep checking back in the hallway just to make sure there's no necromorphs coming, because there's going to be a point in time where there's going to be one that does spawn, and you're going to want to be careful of that. So now we have access to the level 3 suit, and if you don't have the money for it, sell off like some small meds, sell off some ammo you don't necessarily use, or maybe even if you, really wanted that level 3 suit, you could always sell off plasma cutter energy, or just even for the most part, like, maybe even like a bigger med pack, because honestly, getting level 3 suit should kind of save you from needing to heal too often. And plus, at this point in time, you're 4 chapters down, you're probably an okay shot. So, especially if you're playing on impossible mode, you probably know how to deal with a lot of the enemies at this point. And realistically speaking, you know, not taking damage is your main priority for Dead Space. That's the main thing you really want to have happen. You could say that for any game, but this is the type of game that where not taking damage is very important for the harder difficulty settings. And knowing, you know, which limbs to take down and knowing which necromorphs are going to spawn, you know, kind of really does help. Granted, again, you could say that about pretty much almost realistically any game, but I feel like Dead Space Impossible Mode is just kind of that type of game. Like, knowledge is definitely your main source of power when it comes to this mode specifically. Definitely makes the game a lot easier to go through. And in all reality, I mean, Dead Space, like, once you kind of get things figured out, it's not too tantalizing, or however you say that. It's not too hard, really, realistically speaking. I would honestly say, like, Dead Space 2 might just be a tad bit harder in some cases. Dead Space 3, I feel like, might also be harder, too. Mainly because I've not actually beaten Dead Space 3 on the hardest difficulty setting yet. I only played it once, and then have not gone back since. Just because, I don't know. But I do feel like it might be harder. And I can definitely tell you the remake Impossible Mode is a bit harder, too. Mainly because, like, you know, the die once and you're gone. Same thing with hardcore mode for Dead Space 2. You know, you get 3 saves, and that's about it. And then the final boss of Dead Space 2, you know, that's a challenge in itself. But compared to, like, Dead Space 1, like, you know, Dead Space 1 final boss is nothing compared to, like, the final boss of 2. In my opinion, of course. Not to shit on anybody's opinion if they think, you know, Dead Space 1's harder. That's fine. I understand. I'm not that guy. I'm just telling you what I think, personally. It might come off as rude or mean, but, you know, I don't know. I don't try to. I just have a bad way of explaining things, I guess. So, anyway, Super Slashers. Something I forgot to explain earlier is that the grab panels can, you can actually kind of make enemies sort of move into them. They pretty much just, like, stand within a line in front of the grab panel, and sometimes they might walk into it, sometimes they might not. Sometimes they're smart enough to not walk into the grab panel, sometimes they don't. It all really kind of depends on the AI and how they feel that day, I guess. But if you do have a gun that does have, like, a knockback to it, by this point, Pulse Rifle... No, Pulse Rifle does not have grenade launcher, never mind. I forgot this is Dead Space 1 OG, and this is not later on Dead Space, where we get grenade launcher secondary, so forget that. And I don't think we get the Force Gun for a good while. Also, I'm turning my brightness just because the game was so damn dark on my Elgato I couldn't see it. I couldn't see a damn thing. No, like, unironically, I could not see a thing. Except for, like, you know, some lights here and there. It was very damn dark. But it didn't look that dark in-game. It just, you know, my Elgato makes everything dark, so I should have turned it up there, but I was too dumb. But yeah, if you have Force Gun, you know, you can also force them into the grab panel, and you can get a trophy for doing that 5 times, which I still have to go back and do. And then, you know, this room here, of course, having an extra node on hand always kind of comes in handy. So, get a nice, you know, bit of supplies. I honestly feel like node doors are relatively worth it, especially if you know what's behind that door. If you happen to know what's behind that door and you know if you need that resource or not, then I still think it's kind of worth it. I mean, hell, even without knowing what's behind there, I still feel like just having the extra ammo around is just kind of nifty. Or even having, like, the extra, you know, health packs that you could potentially get from it also is kind of nice to have, too. So, I don't remember if the lurkers spawn before or after the button press, but there's going to be a lurker over here that you kind of have to keep out, you know, keep a look on. And then, of course, in the far distance of the future, there's going to be a infector right there. So, yeah, just watch out for him, too. You could take him down from, like, you know, a pretty good distance with the plasma cutter, which is kind of nice. But, yeah, you see right here, like, I couldn't get him to come into the grab panel because he knew. Like, they knew it was pretty much closed off at that point, so they didn't bother with that. And I think you might be able to melee them into it. like you can kind of like R1 melee knock back them into it, but I don't really care enough to try. Grab panels are too dangerous to mess with anyway, so I don't bother with them. But if you did have like if you did understand how they worked better than I do, then that's something you could just take into consideration to get a kind of a nice free insta kill. But I'm kind of worried about going into them, mainly because it insta kills you, and that's not cool. I don't like getting insta killed. It's not fun. And that should be, I think, all of the enemies in this area, actually. And of course I ran out of stasis, which is fine, because even if you don't have stasis, you can, for the most part, if you're a really good shot and you're quick with your fingers, you know, you could definitely make quick work of a lot of the enemies around. Because realistically speaking, if a slasher or whatever is like charging at you, just shoot the hell out of them. Just shoot their legs. And they can't do anything after that. Yeah, just shoot one of the legs. He can't run anymore. What's he going to do? Hop his way over? Like, that's not going to happen. And at least until Dead Space 4. Ooh. Ah, man, I want a Dead Space 4 so bad. I want one so bad, man. I'm telling you. I want a Dead Space 4 that doesn't need to do the co-op thing that Dead Space 3 did. And if they did do co-op, can you please make it local co-op and not just online co-op? Because that was kind of a dumb idea. To just make it only online co-op. Because I don't have anybody that wants to play Dead Space 3 enough to buy it. So, you know, if I wanted to play co-op with somebody, I typically have to buy the game myself and play it locally. Which I would rather do locally anyway, just because. I'm kind of old school, you know? I'm kind of an old boomer. That's why I play all these old games like Dead Space 1. Oh well, it's fine. Alright, so what the hell am I doing now? Of course, you know, selling my semiconductors. Usually, for those that don't know, I typically like to go to the store almost every chance that I get. At least until a certain chapter when they just, you know, the greenhouse chapter? The medical chapter where you're going through and you're taking all the Weezers or whatever they're called. Except for that particular chapter, because they spawn you with nothing but stores all around. And it's like, good God, I don't need this many. But like almost every room just seems to have like a damn store in there. And we'll get to that section, I think, in a couple of chapters from now. I want to say the Leviathan, I think, is the first main boss. I think is chapter 6, if I'm not mistaken. It might be chapter 6 or 5. I feel like we're definitely getting pretty close. Also, I can't believe I forgot that node. Of all things, I would forget the damn node in the same room with the bench. Like, not surprising. Not every bench room has a node, but there are a lot of times where there's going to be one. So just, you know, don't be a silly goose like me and keep an eye out. Also, these panels right here, I believe, can be destroyed. These panels to like the left and right of me. Those ones like that are kind of like red with like red Doom lettering and stuff on them. Well, I think of Doom when I see them. Doom 2016 specifically. Oh yeah, here's something else that I kind of like about the Dead Space remake as well, is they give you a... When you go to like elevators, they give you like a little way marker thing of like which floor specifically they kind of want you to go to, and I definitely enjoy that. Makes it much easier to have to go through and not have to actually, you know, use my wayfinder to figure that out myself, I guess. And I think coming up next, I think is a Guardian. Or maybe a couple of Guardians. Either that or it was the Pregante. I think it was a Pregnant, maybe. Yes, I think it's the Pregnant area. Okay. So, yeah, to the left, you're going to have a Super Slasher, and you're going to have a Pregnant. You're going to have a Pregnant, and, you know, stasis them around the corner, or don't. I would recommend not doing that as much as possible. Try to save your stasis as much as you can. I know, you know, you could be... I know the game's a bit lenient about it, but even then still, like, you know, if you're like me and you don't know exactly every destination of a stasis module around, then not using them too often would be a good choice. Especially if there's, like, a couple of enemies that you know for sure that you're probably confident with taking out, then, yeah. That's another thing, too, is confidence is definitely key in this game. Like, just knowing that, like, hey, you know, there's these couple of assholes around the next corner. I'm just going to shoot them in the legs, knock them down, shoot off their arms, and just be done with it. But of course, you know, knowing me, I had to use stasis because I wanted to make sure I didn't take any damage at all because, you know, once again, that perfectionist problem is happening again. It even happens, like, outside of recording. I will literally go through, like, a chapter of, like, a game. Or, like, a section of a game. Like, let's say God of War, for instance. Like, I'm doing, like, God of War 1 or whatever. And, you know, I get hit too many times. And, okay, God of War's not the best example because it doesn't really happen that much with God of War. It mostly happens with, like, Ninja Gaiden and stuff. Where I'll be playing that, and I get hit, and I'm like, nope, not doing that. Gotta go back. It sucks. It sucks a lot of the times. It depends on the game, really. Actually, more than anything. What am I doing? I'm being a little cocky, little bastard, huh? Oh, yeah, I forgot these things actually had O2 canisters on them. I forgot about that. So, that's something else that I can kind of give you a tip about is if you stay on the sides of these walls right here, then some of them will actually have O2 on them. Also, I'm being kind of a bit dangerous, so you don't have to follow exactly every footstep that I do here. I'd say take your time, and especially if you have an air canister, then you should be fine. Try not to use it until, like, you're coming back. Actually, no. Use it when you're going through, because, yeah, this stops the asteroids after, and they're not going to appear anymore. Alright, here comes the ever so grateful unfun part. I really should have fast-forwarded this section, but you know what? It's too late now. I might as well watch how I do it before. Okay. So, any tips on this? See how I'm firing the cannon right there? Where I'm kind of like going back and forth between L and R? That's something you kind of want to do. I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but for those that didn't watch it, to give you some tips now. So, you want to alternate between your fires, and another thing you could do is you could turn up your brightness to kind of see, you know, further in the distance to see asteroids. You want to go for the bigger asteroids first. That way they don't do too much damage to you. And ignore any other ones that kind of go to like the edge of the screen, because for the most part they end up just kind of missing. But the reason why you want to alternate between your firing is because you can kind of cover more ground a lot easier. It tends to kind of seems to hit more often than not, basically. Because I've had moments where, you know, I'll shoot off one side of the cannon on like the right or the left side, and then it just doesn't seem to hit. And I feel like a lot of the chances of hitting are more increased if you were to do what I'm, you know, this alternate fire thing. Yes, your heating goes up faster, but still. And another thing too is kind of like watch your heating. You know, try not to shoot nearly as often, but if they start to get kind of, you know, you start to get kind of farther in, like right now, where we're getting somewhat like over halfway through this part of it. That's when they're going to start spawning in more, and then you kind of just want to just go ham. Something else that I kind of tend to do, since, you know, the whole thing is really, really wiggly, especially on analog stick, it's really hard to control. Well, learning the control of it will definitely help in the long run, for sure. One thing is, don't move the stick too hard. You know, softly move the stick, because this thing just jumps. You know, it's leaps and bounds with how far it goes whenever you flick the stick. Or not flick it, whenever you hold it. So if you were to flick the stick, then at the very least, you could definitely make a lot more precise movements. Another thing, too, is if there's like a line of asteroids coming your way, like a horizontal line of asteroids, then, you know, hold down both cannons and just hold the stick left or right, and then for the most part, it should hit a good portion of them. There are way better videos out there that explain the scenario of what goes on with the turret sections. And to me, it's always just been kind of like trial and error type situation, especially if you want to get, you know, more than 60% health, that, you know, achievement for it. If you're going for that, then, you know, there's way better guides out there than what mine can give, because honestly, it really is just a, not luck of the draw, but it really is just a trial and error situation. You really kind of have to just feel it for yourself and get an idea. Like I said, my best advice for that would just have to be, you know, fire alternatively, or alternate your fire, and then not only that, but don't, you know, hit the stick too hard, basically. you want to kind of like flick the stick and make it to where like you make micro adjustments, you know, around the camera there, because it goes pretty damn far. And you can't change the settings on it either. Can't change your sensitivity. It's weird. So yeah, you don't want to you know, hold that stick too hard, as they would say. Somebody will probably get that reference, maybe. Oh man, so we don't have very much left to go. Yeah, when it comes to the asteroid thing, I know I'm still on it, but yeah, just look up a video specifically about that. Also, these little turds. So these are a part of another creature called the Divider, and this is the head of the Divider. You don't need to fight these ones right now, because you could just easily run to the elevator and just get away. And if he happens to grab onto you, just, you know, keep mashing the X button or whatever, whatever console you're playing on. And I don't think it's going to kill him. If he grabs you, I don't think it's an instant kill on him or not. But for the most part, you could basically make your way to the elevator. And sometimes I think they do drop items. I don't think it happens all the time. I think it's mostly probably just the Dividers themselves that drop the items more so than the actual body parts. But when it comes to the heads and the other little creatures, I always just tend to use stasis and then stomp them. Also, this should be the section where the Necromorph does appear. Every once in a while, for those that have played Dead Space long enough, you'll probably know that sometimes you can get away with things like that, where a Necromorph will try to get you, and he ends up getting screwed by the shop. So that can happen. And that's, you know, the mistake that I made right there was like a dork, you know. I was being cautious in the beginning, and then I thought, oh, that'd be okay. You know, he's not going to spawn until like way down there. No, that's not the case. So, oh well. You know, it happens. What can I say? What can I say? What can I say? Alright, so I have enough money to buy more plasma energy, of course, since I'm mostly just going to be running plasma cutter and force energy, for those that have skipped ahead to this chapter specifically. Yeah, I'm mostly running, you know, plasma cutter and force gun. That's kind of the idea. Why am I running back to sell these off? Am I really that greedy? Am I really that greedy right now? Well, then again, this is Dead Space 1. We kind of need the inventory space. Which you do get more inventory space by buying another suit, so if you haven't bought the level 3 suit by now would be a good time. And that's what we're running, too. For those that aren't too sure, because it's kind of hard to distinguish between the suits. At least for me it is, because I'm kind of dumb. Not that you'd be dumb, but, like, I'm dumb specifically. But, yeah. We are running level 3 suit. You can kind of somewhat tell, but it's kind of hard. But, anyway, that's it for the video. Take care, everybody.